Welcome along to the Gary Neville podcast, which today is coming to you from the Etihad Stadium. And I think Gary and I are as shell-shocked as anyone at what we've just seen. How do you begin to explain Manchester City 0, Tottenham 4, Gary?
Yeah, very surprising. I mean, shocked. Spectacular day, spectacular result. Maybe it's a lazy thinking process to go into the international break and thinking, well, OK, City will reset, they'll come back after it and they'll be back to their best, and Pep will have got them at it. He's had his obviously contract renewed, which just gives incredible news to not just the players but the fan base and everybody that success is going to remain at this club for at least another 18 months, 2 years, because that's what he brings. He guarantees it almost. And then you watch that today, the first 10 minutes, I thought City were brilliant. I thought they should have been 2-0 up. Erling Haaland misses chances. But from that moment in, Spurs really were fantastic in different ways. Fantastic in terms of their play in the last part of the first half, fantastic on the counter-attack in the second half, but also fantastic in their sort of game management, their defending. But from a City perspective, it feels very different. This feels like, I used to say, when you're winning something, something's happening, but when you're sort of on the decline, I hate to use the word decline, but it does feel a little bit like a group of players who, a number of things, 2 or 3 things that I'm thinking. The idea of growing slightly old together, the idea of playing the volume of games together and the physical and mental sort of demands of that. And then the third thing is, how many times can you keep going? You know, I played for a manager and a club that kept going, but there were times whereby you just fall over in a certain season. You've won the league 3 times on the bounce. You've won it twice. You've won doubles. You've won trebles, and you just can't go any further. And you just need that little bit of your shoulders just drop a little bit. And it feels like that's that third thing that's happening here. So you look at those 3 things, and that's what it feels like right now at this moment in time. A group of players who really have run a million miles. They've been sensational, but they've just sort of, if you like, become a little bit sort of, if you like, punch drunk, a little bit sort of like that, and that's how it feels. Leggy, lacking in energy. Obviously they've lost players as well, and a couple of players missing through injury that are vital players, and I think I sit here tonight with a long way to go thinking this feels different. This feels like, if you're Arsenal, if you're Liverpool, who I think are the 2 genuine teams that can win the title other than Manchester City, you must not get carried away, but you must feel, hang on a minute, there's no excuses here now. Differently. I think I'm looking more at Arsenal with that statement really than Liverpool, because I think anybody at the start of the season that would have said Arne Slot would have come in and done what he's done would have said, no, I'm not quite sure that's going to happen. This was Arsenal's season if it wasn't going to be City's. So I think the pressure's really on Arsenal now to step up and go for it. They had a good start today with a 3-0. But for Liverpool, sat there at the top of the league with that back 5 that they've got, with those front players and the options they have, they must be really fancying it now. Big game next week, Liverpool City. And I know there's only a few points in it. I know there's a long way to go, but it feels like today, if Manchester City were to win the title this season, as I sit here right now, I think it would be Pep Guardiola's greatest Premier League, just because of what we've seen.
He hasn't generally gone in for big transfer reconstructions recently, has he? Especially in January.
No.
But do you think that what has gone on over the last few matches, but especially here today, might prompt a rethink this coming January?
I thought that if they can get a player, I think that they would ordinarily sign, and I think they'll do the business in January and bring a midfield player in. I think that's number one. But I think to get Pep Guardiola to stay again, they've obviously promised him a great contract, but they must have promised him a reinvestment next summer that's quite spectacular, and a rebuild of this team. And I would imagine they'll wait for that. I don't think we'll see sort of like, 2 or 3, 4 signings. I think we might see one in the transfer window that could sort the midfield issue out. But I look at it and think, it's not just Rodri. I mean, today he's obviously put in Rico Lewis on the right of midfield to sort of make it a bit more solid, with Bernardo Silva, Gundogan and Savino on the left. Phil Foden just in front of them, and they've been obliterated in midfield. I mean, Kulusevski, Son, Maddison, even Sarr and Basuma, they've really run all over them. They really have. They've played round them. They've looked so easy to play against. Kovacic obviously has lost as well today, other than Rodri. So it's not just that, though. It isn't just that. The back 4 look knackered. They look absolutely beat. Every single one of them today. Solanke had the better of the 2 centre-backs. They were on the edge with him. Son had the better of Walker, as did Werner at the end. and Kulusevski had the better of Guardiola. They were all beaten today, physically and mentally. I've been there, where you're one-on-one, you're just not having it, and they've got you right where they want you. Those 4 Tottenham players up front that played, the 3 that started, and the 1 or 2 that came on, they had those City defenders right where they wanted them, and that's as big a problem for City as it is the midfield, because your back 4 can still, a good back 4 that's performing. Look at Liverpool. Liverpool's back 4 are still performing. Canate and Van Dijk are at a different level at this moment in time than the City centre-backs that we've seen today. And they're getting Liverpool through a lot of these games with obviously Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold and Gomez and the other defenders that are contributing.
And those 2 City centre-halves that you're talking about hadn't even been away with their countries. I know John Stones and Manuel Akanji are coming back after injury. Is that perhaps a perception that maybe players are having to be rushed back because of the injury problems that they're having?
Well, Pep Guardiola mentioned that in his pre-match press conference, and his pre-match interview, today, where he said that there are players coming back that haven't got enough minutes in the tank. That's true, and there's no doubt that they're demonstrating the sort of fatigue levels of a player or the lack of sharpness of the players that are coming back. But it's not just that either, because Kyle Walker's played a lot of games and he's struggling, really struggling. Guardiola's played games, he's struggling. Looks good going forward, looks like a real threat. But today Kulusevski had him on toast. And Werner at the end. I mean, I mentioned in commentary, I've seen Kyle Walker in the last 5 years play one-on-one better than any right back I've ever seen, against world-class players in any age and any generation, like Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. He's man-marked them out of the game and been brilliant against them. But at the moment, Kyle's really struggling with his positional sense, and he's getting back, obviously, in the first half with the goals that we saw. But in the second half, the last one, they last with you, those moments. They do erode your confidence. When a Werner goes past him like he did and slots it across, that doesn't happen to Kyle Walker. So there are lots of things that happen in that City back 4 to add on to the problems that they've got in midfield. And then if you put Haaland's sloppiness in front of goal today with it, which maybe wouldn't ordinarily always happen, you've got a problem where you lose 4-0, but it's still a spectacular result. But there are. This is not a time to, this is a team that have been prolific in winning titles and winning trophies. This is not a time to stick the knife into Manchester City. It's a time to observe that maybe this team's just dipped over the edge a little bit and it's going to struggle. But it's got a spirit, it's got a personality, because they never write off a team that's won 4 titles in the row. They've got resilience. They've got all the characteristics of anything you would ever want in a football team. They've proven that. But they just look like they've suffered too much together. They've gone through too much together. The volume of games, everything. I said before, they've run 1,000,000 miles together, and it just looks like they need a rest. And they need some help maybe from a few younger players that maybe could come in and sort of give them a bit of sort of respite. But yeah, we'll see what happens. It's interesting, it's intriguing. It's what we wanted. We wanted a league that was more open, that we didn't just have an obvious winner, and there's no doubt we're in that position.
With everything that may need to go on with the squad and the fact there may have to be some reconstruction, were you surprised that Pep Guardiola committed to another 2 years here?
I was surprised. I thought that he would probably leave, but I was surprised that Aguero stayed so long. I was surprised that David Silva stayed so long. I've been surprised by this City project for 10, 12 years. I didn't think it'd get to the levels it's got to, so it shouldn't be anymore. But Pep Guardiola's got the perfect club for him, in the sense of the way in which it's set up and the way in which they've delivered players for him, the way in which they've allowed him to coach. They've given him a platform to be able to build a great football team in this last few years. And he's enjoying himself, obviously, and he doesn't look at any other options probably in Europe or around the world at this moment in time and think, well, yeah, the grass is not greener. And that's great in some ways for the Premier League, great for Manchester, actually, not from a point of view of the red side of Manchester, but if you're looking at it, it's good that Pep Guardiola stays in the Premier League. And there was a point that I think Micah Richards made before the game today, that if you're Arne Slot or if you're Mikel Arteta and you're going to win a league, you almost don't want to wait for him to go before you win a league. You almost want to try and win one off him at least. Jurgen Klopp did that, and that means a lot. That means a lot. That's why Jurgen Klopp's... What you think about Jurgen Klopp's performance levels at Liverpool, the Guardiola factor has to be put into that, the sense of what he actually achieved with lesser resource than Guardiola has had at City. And that's why Jurgen Klopp's up here, because of the fact that he run them so close in so many seasons. But I'm looking at it this season now and thinking that Pep Guardiola, he obviously fancies it. He's up for the fight. And to be fair to him, at the end of the game today, he didn't just sulk and go down the tunnel. He went out there onto the pitch, he fronted it, he went and shook his players' hands, he hugged a few of them. And that's what I would expect from a champion manager. You've got to suck on the lemon sometimes. It's not pleasant. We used to hate losing. It was a crisis when we lost. Not quite the same, I don't think, at City. I don't think when, I'm not being disrespectful, but I think when United lose even now, the feeling is that there's a greater crisis than there is when Manchester City lose. But Manchester City, I think, are going to be put under pressure. The players are going to feel it at this moment in time. They've lost 5 games on the bounce. That does not happen. It was getting boring coming here for the last couple of seasons or so at times, because you just knew the outcome before you started, and you literally knew if City were kicking that way, that your head was going to be swung that way for the whole of the second half of the game or the first half of the game, if they're usually kicking that way, knowing that the outcome is 75% possession, they're going to dominate the game, they're going to get in front, and that we're going to be sat up here trying to create things in commentary to say. But what we've watched today, we don't see. We just do not see that. And the shock is that it's come after an international break when Pep Guardiolas announced his new contract, and you thought that City would have reset and that the mood would have been brilliant, and that Tottenham are inconsistent. They just lost to Ipswich, but Tottenham were spectacular. They were brilliant in the game.
I was going to say Tottenham fans will probably be screaming at us, what about us? Justifiably as well. How do you explain that then, that a team that before the international break can become the first team to lose to Ipswich in the Premier League this season, can then just a fortnight later come and be the first team to beat Manchester City here in 2 years?
It's that thing of consistency and reliability, Robert. It really is. It's the thing that everyone searches for in life. That, one thing I thought happened today, and I thought it at half-time, and you were right, Pep Guardiola will have gone for City's players at half-time and said, come on, we'll win this game, we'll get one back against Spurs. We saw them at Brighton, you can do it. But I think Ange Postecoglou will have been in the Spurs dressing room at half-time today, wandering round every single one of them and looking at them in the eye and saying, no, not again. We cannot come off this pitch today without 3 points. We cannot lose faith in ourselves again and sort of build this distrust even further, and this inconsistency line and this flaky Spurs line even further. We have to stop it. And to be fair, I think he set them up really well in the second half, amongst the fact that he will have told them in no uncertain terms, I think, maybe in a calm way, but he'll have definitely made that point to them about how he wanted them to be in the second half. But from a tactical perspective as well, I thought that the 4-5-1, which was a lot more rigid in the second half, a lot more compact, they allowed them to play around the edge. Similarly to how Arsenal did it here a month or two ago when they had 10 men. They allowed City just to play around the edge. Now, City got a couple of chances, but the discipline from Spurs in the second half and the focus was fantastic. Their confidence on the ball, their ability to counter-attack, but most of all, their competitiveness and their diligence was really important. James Maddison, I said it as he came off, not just James Maddison, this whole Spurs team have set themselves a standard in the second half of this match on game management, being able to withstand attack after attack after attack, focusing, concentrating and staying together and being compact in terms of your spirit, but also in terms of your positions. They've set a standard. They've set a standard. When they get into a situation in a few weeks against a lesser team, another Brighton, if you like, who are a fantastic team, but, when Brighton came back against them, they can't let that happen again. You have to be compact, you have to be diligent, you have to be concentrated in every single second of every single football match, in every single second and every single minute of training, and the intensity can't stop. And the intensity of those Spurs players in that second half grew the more they got confident and encouragement in themselves that we can actually do this. We can do this, and if you can do it here, you can do it anywhere. So that's what they've told themselves today. And if you go back now into the dressing room of Ange Postecoglou, his message at the end of the game is, that's the standard. Forget the goals. Forget the beauty of the football at times. I know you can do that. We all know you can do that. It's the other bit that you've proven today. Keeping a clean sheet at Manchester City. The goalkeeper coming out and catching it and a bit more composed in the second half. All those things are more important, or as important as the bits that we know they can do. And I think that's what Spurs have proved themselves today. But we have to watch them again in the next few weeks and see whether they go and fall back into their old ways. And that's what Ange Postecoglou and the players have got to try and guard against. It's a great night tonight for them. Them fans that I actually had lunch with a Tottenham fan today, believe it or not.
Did he pay?
No, I paid because it was in Manchester, and he was fearing the worst. But he's gone home tonight, and I'm thinking, you never know. And you've got a good record. You've done some good things here at City, but it's a glorious night for Spurs, and they're a good team. And I like Ange Postecoglou. I love the football, but they've got to get that other bit right, that fight bit. They've got to do that all the time. If someone was calling you flaky, someone was calling... What's the other nicknames that they have for Spurs?
That's just Spursy, isn't it?
Yeah, get rid of it. Get rid of it. Don't have it anymore. Be the team that breaks that sort of... that pattern that's existed for many, many years. Why are Spurs like they are? Why are they inconsistent? Don't be inconsistent. You have a choice every single day to actually, be the concentrated, focused, disciplined, hard-working team that you were in that second half, or not be it. You might as well be it if you're going to be out there. And that's what they've done in this second half. So it's a really good second half, a really good day for them.
And from James Maddison's personal point of view, if he is to get his England place back, does he have to show, as you've just suggested, that not only is the penny dropped today, but it drops consistently and that he maintains that benchmark performance?
Yeah. We love his character. We love his personality. We love seeing it when he scores. But to be a serious football player, and he is got the potential to be a serious football player, he needs to do what he did in that second half, and that's be tenacious. Pep Guardiola came here and turned Kevin De Bruyne and David Silva, two of the most glorious, beautiful midfield players, into fantastic defenders. It's not mutually exclusive. You don't have to be a great attacker or a great defender. You can be both. You can work your backside off for your team and be a fantastic defender and also be a creative genius. We've seen it over the last 10, 12, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Some of the greatest players I played with were also the greatest spirits. I'll name one, Wayne Rooney. Fantastic. As soon as he gave the ball away, he was like a kid in the street trying to fight for it back. And that's what he's done in the second half, James Maddison. And that's what Spurs did in the second half. But James Maddison in particular we're talking about now. Don't be... I'm trying to think of the right phrase. Don't be the maverick, the one that people say, well, where do you fit him in? He's no good out of possession. He doesn't work hard. Physically, don't be that player. You don't have to be. Because David Silva and Kevin De Bruyne and other great players that play in this league and around the world, Xavi, Iniesta, think of them all that have played in that position where he played today, in that three in midfield or the one just off the front. And they're absolute dogs when they don't have the ball. And be a dog. Be horrible. And that's what I think he's proven today. It's the best I've ever seen him defend in the second half. Ever. It's the best I've ever seen him defend. On behalf of his team, but also himself. And he did a fantastic job. But next time I watch him, I'll be looking at whether he does it or whether he just thinks, no, I'm going to do that. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Carry on as you are. You'll be an England player because no one can touch him. All those players that we've got for England that are fantastic, he's amongst the best of them when he played. He absolutely ran that game for the first 10 minutes of the second half, and he set the tone for Spurs to get that first goal in the second half and go 3-0 up because he got on the ball and showed courage. That's the bit we know he can do, but then he showed the other side.
So is there an element of you that maybe thinks, all very well showing this against the Manchester Cities of this world, but you've got to show that against the Ipswiches of this world as well?
Well, you do. I mean, that's obvious, but and sometimes it can be getting yourself up for those sort of smaller games. I'm trying to think of this idea that you have to get yourself up for every game. The big games come with a heightened anxiety and heightened feeling of sort of preparedness. You feel like something's different that week when you're building up to a game like this. But then you play Ipswich at home, that's where you think, right, okay, I've got to switch it on. And I don't mean switch. It's naturally on when it's a big game. It's on. You can't help but it's on. You see the adverts for the game. You know it's on television. You know everyone's watching. You know it's a massive game against great players. But then Ipswich at home, it's not on television. Not as many people are watching. And that's when you've got to really sort of, if you like, switch yourself on. That's where you've got to sort of go inside and think, right, okay, why am I doing this today? What is it today that I'm not coming off that pitch beaten? And there's a real seriousness in preparing your mind for that and a mentality. Because it's danger when you start to think, oh, it's Ipswich at home. That's the danger. Never think that. Top teams never think that. Manchester City have never thought that in the last 4 years. That's why they've been consistent and won the league. So if you're Spurs, you have to really, do something different in preparing for these teams that you should beat. You have to do something different. You have to find a way of preparing and create a routine that tells yourself that when you get in that tunnel, no, I'm absolutely on it today. I'm on it like I would be if I was playing Liverpool or Manchester United or Manchester City or Tottenham or whoever it is, whoever you're playing for. You have to switch it on. So, yeah, that's what they have to learn, that mentality of being consistent every single week. And it isn't just a case that you'll play against the lower team and naturally be as prepared mentally as you are you have to work at it. You have to fight for it. And that's what they have to do now, these Spurs players. They've got a lot of talent. They've got a great pattern of play and a manager who knows how to set a team up.
Maddison took the plaudits today with your Man of the Match award, but there were a number of candidates. Kulusevski, I think you mentioned,
brilliant.
was a dilemma, wasn't it?
He was as good as Maddison. He was. Kulusevski was special out there today. I mean, what he's done out there on that pitch today by running past players and his quality, his strength, and his hard work. I don't know how far he's run, but he's run a lot. I know that. But he's absolutely fantastic performance. I mean, normally we'd be talking about Son, wouldn't we? And you can. He played well, Son. He didn't have a bad game, but no, Kulusevski was and looks a serious player. I've used that word a lot in listening, to be honest, serious. I keep on using it. No, but he's become a hell of a player. And the strength of him and his running power, he's getting better. But his subtlety on the ball and his way in which he's beating it. He used to sort of get it on this right-hand side, didn't he? And you think, here we go, cut in, left foot, trying to swing it into that far corner or across it into the box. And he still does that. He did it for the first goal. But he's got a variation now to his game, which, to be fair, Ange Postecoglou, I think, has brought out of him, where he plays more central at times. He sometimes makes runs across the way, where actually before, you just felt he was always positioned and stationed here. And you thought, I know what's going to happen next. No, he's a different player now. This is a player that he started to get to that level where you're thinking, oh, hang on a minute. Your Real Madrids, your Barcelonas this world that usually prey on players that are fantastic at clubs like Tottenham. They're thinking, hang on a second. He's someone we need to look at. Bayern Munich's of this world and clubs in the Premier League. I'm not being disrespectful to Spurs, but that's a performance that would think, and he's been like that for a bit. So, you know, he was outstanding today. He was as good as Maddison, but Maddison, just the goals, I think, just tipped it his way.
And we should give credit as well to the makeshift defence, because they haven't played together too often, certainly not in the Premier League. They've been the European pairing. Dragusin, who's had his critics since he's come in. Davis, who hasn't had that much Premier League football. And also the goalkeeper, who made some important saves too.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a few things. One, Haaland was a little bit wasteful in that first 10 minutes, which you need a bit of luck. The goalkeeper made some good saves, but, you know, Dragusin and Davis did as well as they possibly could do. They were cuddled alongside by Udogie and Porro, but also they had players in and around them in front. Sarbasuma and Maddison, and obviously whoever the two wide players were at the time in the game, they did a really good job sort of making sure that they were protected, which, you know, I have no embarrassment in that. I played centre-back a number of times in games where I needed protection. I needed players to be in front of me, I needed players to be alongside me, because if it was left one-on-one on my own, I'd have struggled. I'll give you an example. You play away at Arsenal against Thierry Henry. I played there a couple of times as a centre-back. I'm sorry, don't leave me in the channel with him, else I'm in trouble. So what I want is my right back in. I want my right midfield player back in front. I want my centre midfield player on the right side in front of me. I want the left centre midfield player right in front of me. I want my left centre back tight to me. I want the left back in. And before you know it, you've actually got quite a good foundation around you to be able to defend from. And that's what Ben Davies and Dragusin needed today. They needed that. They weren't really left exposed at times, which would have caused them a big problem. First 10 minutes of the first half, they did get exposed, because what happened was that for some reason Spurs allowed City to poke it through the middle of them in that period, and then they stopped it after that. They made them go around the edge, which I think was absolutely the right way to go. So yeah, well done to them both. They did a good job, but it was more the collective team performance that enabled them to be able to defend well.
Just to end on two matters away from this particular game. Firstly, Harry Kane, after his comments about country before club, then went on last night to become the quickest player to reach 50 Bundesliga goals with yet another hat-trick. Remarkable career.
Oh, absolutely incredible. And to do that, I mean, you think of all the players that have been there in that league, to do that is fantastic.
Even quicker than Haaland, who he took the record from.
Yeah, so, I mean, the goal he scored last night was special as well. A little bit of luck, it's popped up and he heads it. But, no, Harry Kane, I said 5-6 years ago, he's gold. Great professional, great football player, consistent striker, at the level of Shearer, no doubt, and that's pretty high praise. As equal, I would say, now in terms of the greatest English striker that we've produced in the Premier League era.
Equal of Shearer?
I think equal of Shearer in terms of goal scoring. I still think Rooney, as an all-round player, is a better player than both. But I think as a sort of out-and-out strikers, that them two are sort of stand out there. And then Rooney, for me, is just, I mean, the best Manchester United forward that I ever played with. But he was a forward. He played left, played right, played centre, could drop in, could turn, scored all different types of goals. He was just something completely different, Wayne Rooney, just a spectacular player. But that out-and-out sort of centre forward, I think that ultimately, I think those two are the best.
And just finally, we're talking ahead of obviously Ruben Amorim's debut, but you've met the new Manchester United manager this week. What did you make of him, and what do you make of him almost wedding himself to a system before he's really seen his new players in action under him?
He's very certain about the fact that he's got this very clear idea, very clear identity. That's how I play, and the players will know exactly what I want. There is no sort of second option. There's no plan B. This is how we are going to play. Now, what he did say was that obviously, your wing backs, they will start off being the more defensive choice of wing backs, the full backs like Dalot and Malacia and Mazraoui. But there may be games in a few months' time when we start to sort of get a little bit more comfortable with the system, where you could play Garnacho or you could play Ahmad as one of the wing backs and take it into a different direction. Then you've got a left-sided centre back that might be a Martinez or a Shaw that can go out there and play left back. So it obviously is a flexible system that can maybe move into different systems with different players and different types of players playing in different roles, particularly the wing back and outside centre backs. I played three at the back under two England managers, which were Terry Venables and Glenn Hoddle, and I didn't play as a wing back. I did play as a wing back in a couple of games, but I mainly played as the right of a back three. But what that enabled us to do was to play Darren Anderton or David Beckham at times as a right wing back, which meant that I could just slot across because I was comfortable going out to right back, which meant that you didn't lose too much attacking force. So, yeah, it's the way forward, I think, for the modern coach, that don't complicate it, don't confuse players, give them a clear way of playing. We're not going to play 4-3-3 one week, 3-4-3 the next, 4-4-2 the next. We're going to really work on one idea. And to be fair, it's probably what these players and this club, Manchester United, need at this moment in time, because they're all over the place and have been all over the place now for, probably 18 months. And they need something. They need a different idea. They need an enthusiasm. Then obviously Amorim, I think, demonstrated that all week in his interviews since he's took the job. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, it's obviously a complete departure for the players, for most of them. And it's a complete departure for the club, because I think Louis van Gaal tried to bring in three at the back at the very beginning and then ditched it after about a month. I mean, there have been managers who flirted with it. Even Sir Alex Ferguson played it a few times, but it's never been a system that the club have adopted. But that doesn't really matter. When you watch Sporting Lisbon a few weeks ago, which they did on television against Manchester City, if you can get that enthusiasm and energy into the team and that hard work and that ethos, we've just been talking about it with Spurs today, that's the most important thing. You mentioned in the interview on Thursday with me about, the athleticism of the team is the key thing. It's got to be a team that are difficult to play against to do that, particularly in the modern age. But it was always the same. But the physical aspects of these players now is far greater than it's ever been. And you have to match the other team physically, and that was a traditional principle going back 40 years, 100 years, and United have not been able to do that. So it'll be really interesting to watch. I'm intrigued to be sat at home tomorrow on a Super Sunday and watch Manchester United play with a new manager, with a new system. And look, there'll be no judgment tomorrow ultimately, because it's a case of just understanding what's going to happen and how the players are going to adapt to it with only a few days training.
Well, you'll be involved in the following Super Sunday, which is the big one we're all looking forward to, Liverpool against Manchester City. But for now, Gary, thanks for the podcast, and thank you for joining us on the Gary Neville podcast.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you.